He was born in October 16, 1991, in San Fernando General Hospital. Well, when he was the age to go to school, he went to Open Bible. Open Bible had a kindergarten there. He went there. From there, he went across to San Fernando Boys RC. He did very well there, and then he went across to San Fernando Senior Sec. From there, well, he got all his subjects. He was always a child that he liked to be into everything. He liked to talk, and he liked to sing. And his mother and I used to get away sometimes, but I used to take him to Sandfest. He won things in Sandfest, and I used to sneak him out and go, and she used to quarrel. No, let me stay in school, but he did.
I remember very distinctly Sandfest finals for the storytelling competition, and my mother, she told me that, well, no, you need to focus on your schoolwork, and she didn't care to hear much about the extracurricular activities. And I remember running away from school to go and take part in Sandfest, and ironically enough, I won the storytelling competition, and that still didn't cut it for my mother. Her concern was education. She was a stickler for education. It was very important that we all, her children, were going to school, getting the best education, and really getting a good start in life. My parents had me when they were both 17, having us at a young age. She did not want that same path for me. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother and my second brother, well, my younger brother. Now, my father in total had 5 children. It's my 2 sisters and my 2 brothers, and I'm the eldest of all of them. My 2 sisters live in the States, and my father, he was in and out of my life over the course of my growing up. I had a father over a phone, so to say, and over letters. And it was a basic childhood, I would think. I spent a lot of time climbing on the prom tree in the backyard, building tree houses. I had some pets. I was a Sea Scout, the first Notre Dame Sea Scouts, and I think that helped to build a lot of character in me. I used to always take part in calypso competitions, but for some reason I just used to always come second. I used to play pan, and I remember while growing up on Independence Avenue, we lived in front of Hatter's Pan Yard. So going to sleep every night, you would constantly hear pan being played because it was always practiced at that pan yard. I was always that child who would take part in every single assembly, whether it was reading the school prayer, singing the national anthem, and I think that students would probably have gotten fed up of seeing me so often. I'm proud to have attended Old Tech. I remember when I wrote CXC, the vice principal said to me, "Congratulations, Nikoli. I didn't expect you to do so well." It was a shock to him. It wasn't from a place of malice. He wasn't being angry or trying to be disrespectful. But persons did not expect that if you attended Old Tech, you would have very many prospects in life. That Old Tech was not a place for smart children and persons who intended to excel in life. And so I was very proud of myself to have walked away from secondary school with 11 O-levels. And from there, I was also working. So I remember my first ever job was not far from Old Tech, actually, right on top of the hill, where it was one of these companies where you go around as a peddler with selling the as seen on TV items. I would walk with a big bag on my back and going from place to place and selling items. As luck would have it, I started working in the media. I felt as though this was where I needed to be because it would help me with current affairs so that when I'm on radio I can actually talk about things that I know because I'm seeing it firsthand and so forth. And I did that for some time. I remember having a conversation with my mother and my father about going to UAE. My father, well, I had asked him for it, the money, and he had gotten it to me. So I was really happy and I started on campus. At this time, I was working at the Government Information Services Limited. I had to be traveling from San Fernando to Mova, because that's where GISL was, and then from there to St. Augustine to go to classes, and sometimes classes would run late, and then traveling back to San Fernando. I was probably like the PTSD bus champion. Always had bus tickets on me, always looking out for the next bus, because just traveling with a taxi was too expensive. I couldn't afford it. So that whole trek, it really pushed me to start considering being on campus or taking up a residence on campus as on a whole. And at the same time, I decided that I wanted to run for the Guild of Students. So I tossed my hat in the ring for guild elections. I was running for Faculty of Humanities and Education representative, so one of the faculty reps, and I was successful. I was doing things as the Faculty of Humanity and Education rep that was bringing a lot of attention to the guild in a good way. And so other persons in the guild started to see me as a real resource. After completing my bachelor's in communication studies with a minor in theatre arts, I moved on to pursue mediation studies. So I did a postgraduate diploma in mediation studies, and then I did a master's in also in mediation studies. And in all of those things I excelled, and it was a matter of balancing, because I was full-time working, full-time student, full-time on the guild, full-time life, and I was able to manage everything well for the most part, so much so that I graduated with honors and then a distinction. What really led me to pursue mediation was the experience with my father. Now, my father, he was in and out of my life over the course of my growing up. He migrated to the States with my grandmother and my aunts, and they were living in the States. But my father, he had run-ins with the law, as we say, and he was detained in the US, and he spent some time there, and then he was deported to Trinidad. He was arrested again in Trinidad, and he was on remand. And he was on remand for about 6 years. And I always say, for anyone who understands remand, it means that you're just waiting. You're in police custody. You're waiting for your day in court. You're waiting to have your matter tried, to be proven guilty if the case is, but you're innocent until then. And when my father would come down to San Fernando for court, and you have these prison vans coming down, and he's in there, and you know, you're shouting through little vents and calling out to one another, and that was just an experience that I always felt it wasn't right. This isn't the way life is supposed to be. This isn't how you're supposed to have a relationship with your father or anyone, as a matter of fact, and it's really something that I guess was taking a toll on me. So much so that I stopped at one point going to look for him, because I didn't want to see my father in that state. He would have been in remand for around 6 years leading up to 2015. And in 2015, it's no secret, there was a prison break in Port of Spain from the Royal Jail. It was a situation where 3 prisoners or remandees escaped. One of the escapees was shot and killed at the Port of Spain General Hospital, and the 2 that got away at that point was my father and another guy. And the other guy, after some time, he had given up himself. I was in Port of Spain actually during the prison break. I was getting lunch with some of my co-workers, and my mother called me and she said to me, well, you're here, your father escaped from prison and stuff. And I was like, what? And she said, yes. And at that time we were seeing police up and down, helicopters in Port of Spain, but we didn't know what was happening. I started, I guess, panicking, but I kept it in because I didn't let my co-workers know exactly what was going on. And I had to go back to GISL to read news for 12 o'clock. And of course, that was going to be the major headline. So I started thinking to myself, how am I going to stand in front of a camera and report that essentially my father just escaped from prison? And that was just something that was running through my mind. How am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? At this point, I wasn't saying to anyone that it was my father in terms of in the newsroom and so forth. But I got there and we were kind of late going back to the office. So thankfully, they had started preparing someone else to read the news. So I didn't have to deal with that. They gave me some time off from work to deal with all of that and process that. I was able to go home one time. So I went home in South. I was living on Hall, but I went straight home to be with my family. And in the days that followed, I would go on social media and people would be constantly saying some heinous things. He deserved to die the way he died. And I read every single comment that I could possibly read on Facebook. I remember my grandmother calling me, his mother calling me, and she was saying that she was hearing things and this, that, and the other, and she was crying. At that time, she was in the States. And I was like, well, I haven't heard anything as yet, and trying to comfort her. This was really late in the night. And my cousin called me much later. At that time, I was asleep. And she said, you see the news? You see thing on Facebook? And I was like, what? And she was saying, they kill your father and stuff. And I was like, what? And I remember going up onto Facebook and seeing my father's body, a picture of my father's body, and it just wanted her bullet wounds. At that point, I was just in shock. I couldn't cry. I couldn't feel anything. I was just numb. And I went to my other grandmother, well, who I lived with, my mother's mother, and I crawled in her bed and I told her, well, hey, look what happened and stuff. And she said that, well, she here, so she aware. And from that point, it was about preparing for a funeral, something that I never expected this time soon. It really was unfortunate that this happened and all of that. And the most I felt I could have done was to apologize to the nation on his behalf, if that makes sense. And I was 24 at that time when my father was killed. It was difficult to go back to school, it was difficult to go back to work, but I had to do it. Life had to go on. And that's where mediation came about, studying mediation studies as my postgrad diploma and master's, because I wanted to figure out how we were going to fix this thing. And that is what it's about, conflict resolution, looking at rehabilitation and so forth. I continued with that whole championing that cause of reformation of the criminal justice system. So you had the Commonwealth Youth Council elections coming up later that year in December. And I decided, well, fine, I would run for it. The event was taking place in Malta. When I had gotten shortlisted and I had to get a plane ticket to go there, I went to the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs seeking funding. Not one red cent, as we see. So I decided, well, okay, how would I get to Malta? And I started reaching out to the media to get interviews done, because at that point I had known how to use the media. You go there, you have a presence, and people will be listening and people may be willing to help. And I went to the media and I had an interview after interview after interview, and people were immediately calling afterward and saying that they would give me some money to help with my ticket and all of that. One of the persons, and I know she probably wouldn't want me to mention this, but was Nikoli Jean-Paul. She called me and she said, here's what, I want to support you. I like what you're doing. I'm going to write you a check. Come by the office and collect it.
I felt that the passion that he had not only for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but his story, his backstory, really was one that stood out to me. This is someone who does not allow his backstory to hold him back. And he is just focused with a passion to get what he thinks is the right job and to get that done.
Another person was Elizabeth Montano, Marshall's mother. And she really believed that what I was doing was something positive and decided to reach out and said that on behalf of Marshall and myself, we want to support you. And it was those things that really kind of just gave me that push. I had a friend who also, she gave me an envelope and it was like a couple $1,000s or something. And little by little, or chirp, as we say, I started getting that money and I bought that ticket and I went to Malta. And I was able to successfully contest the position of Vice Chairperson, Policy, Advocacy and Projects. And there I was, one of the 9 executive members on this youth council that represents 1.2 billion young people from around the world. I was the only Trinbagonian representing there to provide a voice for young people, and we were interacting with youth councils from across the world, trying to figure out, well, okay, what's the best model, how to do this, what should we offer, what should we tell governments that they should be doing. We met with the Secretary General of the Commonwealth at that point, and he was able to write letters to all of our heads of government to see, and presidents and so forth, heads of states, heads of government, to see it, well, you have a national who has been elected to this body, please support them. So in my case, it would have been a letter to President Carmona and a letter to the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs at that point.
When he was appointed to the Commonwealth Youth Council, UNFPA, that's the United Nations Population Fund, we work with young people. So when I heard about Nikoli, I said this would be an excellent person to be part of our group, because he's come from humble beginning with some challenges, and despite the challenges, he's been able to achieve so much and do so well. So he would be a great example for other young people to follow. We contacted Nikoli, and he expressed his interest to be part of our youth advisory group. He inspired so many of our other members and also agreed to support a number of our initiatives. He did not really have, say, a strong background in sexual and reproductive health, which is the main focus of UNFPA's work, but he quickly did his homework and he became a strong advocate for the rights of young people to have access to sexual and reproductive health information and both services. And anytime we needed him to review a document, to give feedback, to volunteer at an event, he was always willing to support. He even spoke to young people living with HIV as a means to give them hope and inspiration that just because you have a positive status, that's not the end of your life. But you could still go on further with medication, with assistance to live fulfilling lives. He went out, he volunteered his time to speak to these other young people. He's also represented UNFPA globally in international forums where he's able to be the voice of our young people in Trinidad and Tobago. So oftentimes we hear such negative things coming out of particularly about our young males, and he's been a key advocate in addressing issues of gender-based violence, gender equality, and you don't hear too many men speaking about that, especially young men.
I remember looking around the country and I was not seeing a space or a place for young people to really intersect with government and private sector and civil society to advance their agenda. And rather than going to the ministry and asking for them to do it, I said, why can't I do it? Why can't we as young people do it? And sitting in my friend's living room, that's where I came up with the concept of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Convention, getting young people to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and to not only be the determinants of their own future, but also to add to a national discourse and a national direction. RBC had been a huge supporter of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Convention, and I felt as though they really helped me to take TTYC to the next level, and I'm forever indebted to RBC. I can't quantify how much that support meant to me when I felt as though I was writing hundreds of letters, reaching out to people from all over and not getting that support.
Nikoli represents a story of triumph, because it's very easy to feel abandoned, to feel the world is against you, and to feel like you have no power to fight back.
When Mr. Edwards was elected as vice chair and as a part and parcel of the Commonwealth Youth Council, and someone who in fact I had been tracking for a long time, and finally in fact I remember having a conversation with Mr. Edwards, asking him, boy, when would you reach 25? Because our constitution debars any young person under the age of 25 from being a senator in the parliament. And then he said, I am 25 years and 1 month old. I said, yes.
He said, well, I've been waiting for you to turn 25. Well, an opportunity has arisen in the Senate and I would like to appoint you as a senator. And I was very much inspired. And on the 11th of January 2017, I was sworn in as the youngest ever independent senator in the country's history. I remember carrying my entire family to that because for me it was their moment, because they helped me to get to this point where I was considered for a Senate seat and so forth, even if it was a temporary situation. And truth be told, throughout 2017, I was in the Senate numerous times debating all kinds of pieces of legislation. The first piece of legislation that I had the honor and the opportunity to debate had to do with the Marriages Acts. So what we were essentially doing was ending child marriages in Trinidad and Tobago. And because of my work over the past couple of years, I was able to speak on that with authority, and I continued with that whole championing that cause of reformation of the criminal justice system. There I was standing at the age of 25, the youngest person in the parliament at that point, debating legislation on the reformation of the criminal justice system, less than 2 years after my father had met his demise, and I was opening doors for other young people. I was speaking at all kinds of events and so forth. So I was not there representing Nikoli Edwards. I was there representing the young people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Edwards was determining policy, taking part in determining progressive legislation, and invariably transforming Trinidad and Tobago by virtue of youth perspective having access in the corridors of power.
That is testimony to anything is possible. Anything can happen once you put your mind to it, once you really work toward it. And I left that experience just fired up, ready to be a young person who's doing something positive in Trinidad and Tobago and uplifting other young people. I traveled across the world. I met the Queen of England, Prince Charles, Prince Harry. I sat among presidents and prime ministers discussing with them youth issues, reformation of the criminal justice system, Trinidad and Tobago, and our development. I have been invited to speak to schools, graduation ceremonies in other countries, and every time that I'm brought into another country, I always feel as though I have a duty to represent well, represent young people, represent my country well. And these experiences, I would love for every single young person in Trinidad and Tobago to have them. My grandmother always instilled strong values in us. She ensured that we go to church. We went to church, St. Paul's Anglican, and I think I owe my grandmother a great debt of gratitude for keeping me and my brothers and they in the church and meeting people who are just humble and who are willing to put others before self. So that is a big part of my character. I remember I had gotten dismissed because I went to a press conference and they felt it a disrespect that I came there and my hair was this way and whatnot. And I was just kind of shocked. Why should my hairstyle matter? You understand? So from very young I always had these ideals and this way of looking at the world where things such as your hair, your skin color, your ethnicity, none of these things should matter. You come here, you make a mark, and you hope that generations to come would not remember you, but would remember the things that you were able to do for them without even knowing them. I'm sitting here at 28 and currently pursuing an LLB at UE.
When I was at his age, I would not have thought to pursue the things he would pursue. I didn't have the social conscience he had. I didn't have the awareness that he had of social issues. He's a young man who lives with a passion for making something alive.
He's able to motivate other young people, you know, and give young people who have come from humble beginnings hope that they too can achieve.
And you really don't find that depth of knowledge and wealth of information from persons within that age group. That usually comes from experience and from garnering the positives out of that experience. And Nikoli has managed to do that.
He's a forward-thinking person. He makes it his utmost best to achieve.
I am particularly pleased to see the growth that Nikoli has demonstrated from the first time I met him to now.
To date, I guess people still remember for the most part that I am my father's son and what happened, and I shouldn't get opportunities, I shouldn't speak out, I shouldn't be a public figure, I shouldn't do this, that, and the other. And at times it could really be depressing when I hear that. But for the most part, as I say, having thick skin, I just have to press on. I have to prove to myself more than anything that there is life after these experiences, and there can be better life, as a matter of fact, after these experiences.
Tough times could really build good character.
He has the potential, the passion, and the purpose to go toward. Beside and beyond everything and what anyone may put in his path, that is a young man to watch.
He's done a great job. We're really happy to have him.